Nansen cuts 30% of workforce to reduce expenses, and apparently it has been reported that Binance says it's focusing on talent density after reported layoffs. So let's get into the Nansen stuff first. Blockchain data analytics platform Nansen will reduce its staff by 30%, and they're looking to cut costs. The CEO says he believes they need to make organizational changes to create the right conditions for those who stay. Despite the cuts, they still have several years of runway as it looks to build a substantial operation. And then as far as Binance goes, this morning, independent journalist Colin Wu from Wu Blockchain claimed that Binance may lay off 20% of its staff in June. And that is, again, a claim. So who wants to get this one and talk about layoffs? Because this is our favorite topic on the show. Go ahead, Zach.
The beatings will continue until morale improves. That's the story here, and they're not going away anytime soon. I guess things were so good during the bull run that there's all these people who can be disposed of summarily when things turn south. It's pretty wild. I think CoinDesk sadly has stopped updating that story, I believe. I'm going to fact check myself in a little bit, but they did a great piece of work in assembling all the many layoffs that we've seen since, I believe, last April. And it was something like 25 to 30,000 folks. So it's a significant amount of people who've lost jobs in this industry relating to the downturn in crypto asset prices. It's pretty crazy to see these ones. Nansen, I guess it totally makes sense, right? Like, they're serving a crypto clientele that has smaller budgets. As such, they cannot support the headcount that they were previously able to support. And that's a pretty significant cut right there. If the stuff with Binance, proves to be true, something like an 8,000 person workforce, 20% of that workforce could be gone. That's a lot of folks as well, right? So these are significant numbers. These are significant amount of livelihoods being impacted by these decisions. And it's always sad to see when people lose jobs and, face a new degree of uncertainty. So, always top of mind that these are human stories first. And then obviously sort of the bigger picture industry stuff that we're all grappling with for these many months. But pretty crazy stuff to see that the layoffs still are happening. I thought maybe they would be done by now, but they clearly are not. Will, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I like all the stuff you added in there. And then again, condolences to everyone who's going through this, as it's definitely a troubling time and frustrating. Most people are experiencing layoffs right now at crypto companies. It continues kind of drab or slowly. It hasn't been as fast and furious as it was, say, 9 months ago, but it's still present. The two different layoff scenarios here are interesting, though. So Nansen, it seems like they're cutting staff because they're a service provider for a lot of different companies out there. They provide great insights into how wallets interact, where funds are flowing. People use them in order to trade. And so Nansen is basically totally exposed to this trading market, right? If trading dries up, and I think we have the lowest volume for trading since 2020, then you're going to see these service providers also drop because people who use them are going to actively be canceling subscriptions, which means Nansen's bottom line is going to be dropping. One interesting side note from this is they did raise $75 million in a recent series for its total runway, and it seems to be saving them during this moment or allowing them to continue to operate. But that doesn't mean that you can keep those people on staff. Just because you raise a lot of money doesn't necessarily mean that you have to employ these people. It's a business, so you have to make the decisions best for you. The Binance news on the other side of the story here is a little more interesting because it said that they're probably laying off the low performers, right? So this Binance announcement seems more like the tech layoffs we've seen in traditional tech, right? Where there was huge amounts of people being employed by the Googles, the Metas of the world in 2020, kind of running into this pandemic hiring surge where people thought everyone was going to be online. And then 3 years later, it's like, oh, we have too many people. So they start laying off about 20% of their workforce. That's how I read the Binance story. Binance is still dominating almost every single metric when it comes to exchanges. So I think they're probably just sort of recalibrating. Last thought, they also are moving out of Canada. So it seems like, maybe they don't need all those people to open up that entire new market. Wendy, I'll throw it over to you.
That was actually a good point when you mentioned Canada. I think I skipped that when I when I read the article earlier this morning. Didn't have enough coffee. Coffee machine exploded. But considering the recent news that I believe it was Bybit that pulled out of the Canadian market, this makes sense. So it feels like Canada is going to be cracking down heavily on crypto asset companies. I do want to toss this over to Jen because I believe you are a Canadian. Is that true?
Oh, Canada. Yeah. And an update on Binance in Canada. It looks like the Ontario Securities Regulator is still asking Binance to produce some documents. It's not really clear why they're investigating Binance since they've left the country, but that is an ongoing thing that we need clarity on. I think from a layoff perspective, when we look at a lot of these crypto companies, the last time they raised funds, they thought they were going to be able to raise again and didn't foresee a bunch of different events happening that affected the regulatory landscape. You know, we saw a bunch of companies go bankrupt in the industry. And so I think you can prepare for a bear market, but I really do believe that a lot of companies felt like they were going to be able to raise again. And now they're finding themselves in a situation where VCs are not allocating money to crypto companies because of the unclear regulation, and they're having to extend their runways. With Binance, the statement that Binance provided CoinDesk, I thought was interesting. They said it's not a case of right sizing, but rather reevaluating whether we have the right talent and expertise in critical roles. For me, that feels a little bit like right sizing. Like the statement just feels like a whole lot of nothing. And I think in layoffs, you have, like, if there are layoffs happening or if there are people losing jobs, like having that human element in your communications can go a long way. Zach?
Yeah, and I think some of those big lofty valuations that some of these firms raised at in the good times, they can also come back to bite you, right? When you're trying to top those valuations, and you can't just because valuations in the space have sagged so dramatically. So that's also, I think, a factor at play, perhaps with Nansen and potentially others. I just did want to fact check myself. So CoinDesk did the Herculean work of tracking from April 2022 all the way up to March 28th of 2023 in terms of the layoffs in the crypto sector. At last count, it was 29,868 crypto jobs had been lost. And obviously we've seen significantly more since the end of March. So that is definitely north of 30,000. Just a stunning number to put in context for still relatively small industry employee-wise. Jen, saw your hand. What are you thinking?
Can I add a glimmer of hope? Like, I know I've said this before, but
No,
nope.
Nope.
Let me add a glimmer of hope. Let me do it. Like maybe there's all of this talent that are not bound by contracts right now, or not bound by non-competes, have different interests in the crypto industry and maybe the tech industry at large. And possibly the bittersweet takeaway is we're going to see some really great innovation coming out of these dark times. That's my final thought. I don't know if anyone here can agree with me, but that is my final thought. There is hope and a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel.
I personally think that maybe some of these people that got laid off or are looking for work in the industry that do have actual talent, they'll go out on their own and they'll build something really cool. So fingers crossed that happens.
Hope. Yes.
That was such a nice little optimistic note to end that segment on. That was so nice. That was so nice.